I have with me Sameer Shukla, Executive Director of Nielsen India. Thank you so much for speaking to Bloomberg Quint.
Thank you, Charlene.
In the first 2 months of this quarter, that is July and August, that is when we saw GST actually kicking in and the entire system actually adjusting to the new tax regime. How has demand actually played out, and how has volume growth really been in these first 2 months of the second quarter?
So before coming to the post-GST rollout, if I just dial back, and we all know that in the pre-GST or the prep for the GST rollout in the months of May, June and all, there was a lot of destocking that we were talking about. So which meant that the trade pipeline was actually trying to push stuff out to be really prepared for the GST regime. What we saw there was something interesting. In the trade pipeline, the initial part of the trade pipeline, which is the distributors, the CNF agents and wholesalers, they were trying to push things out. But a lot of stuff was still lying on the retail side of the trade pipeline, which was converting into offtake also. While we saw that the stock levels were depleting even at the retailers' shelves, but yeah, it was converting into offtake. So in the pre-GST regime, May, June kind of months, we saw that the consumer demand was still picking up. Coming July and August, we have seen that that impact of destocking is actually converting towards the later part of the trade pipeline and also on the offtake. So if I see in terms of overall consumption growth, it is still in double digits, healthy double digits, I would say, even in the post-GST period.
Okay. Post-GST, in the first 2 months, can we say it's in a healthy double digits?
Yep.
Okay. And what was the reason for this growth? Which were the sectors, food, personal care or household care? What really led to this growth? Which saw the highest growth in this period?
So if you see broadly among the foods, the non-foods, OTC, and non-foods you can convert, again divide between say personal care and home care. We have been seeing that for the last few years, foods have always grown at a faster pace because commodity to branding, that phenomenon is also happening. And a lot of new brands also coming in. So that trend continues. So in terms of the buoyancy in consumption growth, foods still take a upper seat. Within foods also, typically staples, including edible oil and those segments are really doing very well.
Okay. And also at the channel level, currently, what is demand looking like? Because channel level, a lot of distributors, a lot of wholesalers are still having an issue, moving on to the GST network. What do you see? What is really happening there? Will that actually impact any company's demand per se?
So that's an interesting point. So while at Nielsen, when we track FMCG, we track the retail part of it and not the earlier part of the trade pipeline. But indirectly, we can infer a lot of things. So for example, we know that because of either demonetization or GST, a lot of wholesale driven business was impacted. Now, when we see in terms of impact, and we assume that rural India per se would be largely say catered to through the wholesale route, what we saw was interesting. So if you compare again, if you go back last 2-3 years or maybe a longer period, rural growth for FMCG has always been higher than the metros and the bigger towns.
True.
What we saw was after demonetization in the December 16 onwards, we saw that the rural growth started tapering down, and it at some point in time urban growth surpassed. So it went on for a couple of months. What we are seeing now is the manufacturers and trade has actually started gaining back. And towards the last few months, we are seeing that rural growth is again picking back. It has again gone ahead of urban. So whatever disturbance period that you could see because of channel or wholesale driven business part, that has actually recuperated to a large extent. And hopefully rural and urban growth differential, which used to be maybe 3 to 4 points, will again go back to that position.
Okay, but are there any areas in India where, which are pain points basically, because distributors are not able to actually get onto the network?
Yeah, so that's again, if you see from the manufacturers or the primary shipment point of view to when the consumer offtake happens, there's a sizable lag between these 2 points. So, and we can see it also in the form of the price going up or down.
Yeah.
So while we know that because of the GST regime coming in, a lot of products would have slightly higher or lower price, it is still not reflecting to a large extent on consumer offtake, because the old stock is still passing through that pipeline. Hopefully, September month report, which is supposed to be released in the next few weeks, we'll see that impact coming up. But even in the July and August period, we have not seen a much bigger movement either upwards or downwards in terms of price of products.
Okay, but going ahead, do we see any movement happening in the price of products? Do we expect that to happen?
So while reports will tell, I mean, like I said, I mean, the September report will be released very soon. But what we hear and see in the market in terms of communication also, a lot of manufacturers have started going for much bigger promos, either in terms of offering extra volume or maybe lowering of prices. So that promotion is something which has started kicking in. Hopefully that will reflect in the reports in September and October months.
Okay. How do we see consumer demand at this point in time, especially, because there's a mixed feeling in the market in terms of consumer demand. But where do you see consumer demand at this point in time, and how do we see it really going ahead?
So if you link it with the macroeconomics, for example, so whether it is inflation or food inflation, whether it is the consumer sentiments and all, we have not seen anything which is non-favorable. So on the other hand, most of the things are actually working as a tailwind only. So what we saw in the last few months, the acceleration in the consumption part of it was 3 to 4 points, which is a healthy consumption acceleration. And that's something which is supposed to be continuing going forward also.
So we expect this to continue for the rest of FY18?
That's what we expect, yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you, Shirley.